everybody. I'm really excited today. I am going live with the author of this new book, Anushay Hossain, The Pain Gap. And I was fortunate enough to be recently introduced to Anushay through a mutual friend who said, well, Rachel, you just had a book that came out about pleasure, and my friend has a book coming out about pain. And so really where they overlap is that they're really looking at the ways in which I talk a lot about how bodies in general have been marginalized in the mental health world, and then specifically how feeling good in our bodies has been marginalized and shamed and judged, and particularly for women when it comes to our sexual health and our reproductive bodies. And Anushay talks a lot about how in the medical field, and specifically how for women of color, there has been this invalidation and misogyny, medical misogyny, which is a powerful phrase. And she talks about the ways in which we need to reclaim, as women, our hysteria. Basically, she'll explain that more in a moment, but in order to use our voice, reclaim our voice, to be heard and acknowledged as far as our needs in the healthcare setting. And she specifically talks about with regard to childbirth.
Hi.
Anushay, nice to meet you.
And thank you so much for having me. And thank you to Lydia for connecting us. I know she's already, there she is. So
yeah, well, and I received your book yesterday in the mail. Thank you. It's interesting too. I was thinking of how, as I was reading your book, how we both have moms that are these real feminists. I don't know.
Yeah.
I guess I haven't shared that with you. And that is a huge influence on me to this day.
Yes, me too.
Yeah, yes, like something karmic here is for me to really learn.
Yes, like karmic, definitely. Well, one second, I have your book too, which is right here. So thank you so much for this. This is actually from Lydia.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, as I was saying in the beginning, we think of these words that have a lot of meaning and can be reduced to certain things, pain, pleasure. But really what I have taken as a lot of the similarities in our books is about the fact that we're really talking about, how do we get to this point where certain things that are essential as humans and part of our life force energy, whether it be to bear a child in a healthy way, or I talk a lot about real sexual health and being able to feel good in our bodies. How dare a woman have the right to feel good in her body? How dare a woman have the right to express herself in the medical field? So these ways in which, how do we get to this place, and how can there be a call to action for women, and especially women of color, to be able to be heard, to be acknowledged, to be treated with the care that they deserve for their body and their well-being?
Yes. Well, it's interesting that you say that, because the number one thing I had a hunch about before I started writing the book, and what the book really confirmed and affirmed for me, the women that I met, the women that I spoke with, the women that shared their stories, the medical professionals that I spoke with, the health experts that I spoke with, the doctors, is really that women's health is not a priority. It's not a priority in the richest democracy in the world. And the other thing that I learned is that women are not believed about our bodies. There is a pain gap. The difference between how we approach and the validation we give between men and women's pain. And women's pain is completely not believed and dismissed. And there is this kind of belief that we're just supposed to tolerate it, instead of what is wrong, and 90% of it, this is just one statistic off the top of my head, 90% of people who suffer from chronic pain are women. And it's all over, it's throughout the health spectrum. So even when we talk about a book like yours, which is slightly different from mine, the core is the same, right? Mm-hmm. About believing women and making sure that women don't live this life that is so painful.
Right. I think it's because it's inconvenient. And I think really it's the patriarchy's way of really gaslighting women, in that saying that it's not real, it's not true, because we don't want to be inconvenienced. And even more so, if you aren't living a life of pain, you might really be stepping into your power. You might be stepping into your voice, and that threatens me and the system that I want to believe and uphold.
But it's interesting, because I mean, when I was starting to write this book, I interviewed this amazing Iranian American author named Melody Moetzi, who has just been amazing. But anyway, she said the system is actually working exactly how it's supposed to be working, right? It was supposed to be working for white men. And when you think about women's health in America, the reason I'm really trying to emphasize and focus the voices and experiences and stories of women of color is that, let's say the system is, yes, built for white women, white men. The image of women's health in America is that of a white woman,
Mm-hmm.
in America is the image of a white woman. Maybe it was different, maybe 100, 200 years ago, but things are very different now. And while I feel like white women have to deal with, everyday sexism, women of color have to deal with everyday sexism and racism. And I feel like we're in a really, I hope, hopeful and exciting point in our culture where we have an opportunity to really change how we think, how we approach things, and how we approach women's health, women's rights, women's lives. So that's something I really wanted to do in this book, was put the emphasis on women and our stories and who's believed.
Yeah, yeah. And I really like that there's this call to action as far as let's reclaim the word hysteria as something that it's powerful, it's valid, it is rather than have that be a term that leads us to shrink. No, I'm not hysterical. Yeah, I'm hysterical because it means I matter. I need to be heard. I deserve body sovereignty, and I'm not going to go away. I'm not going to become quiet and shrink just because you don't like it.
The great thing about this book is also, like, it's not just me, talking about women's stories. I mean, the statistics back women. You can't believe how often when women say, I think something's wrong, or I'm in a lot of pain, or I feel this, they're like, especially women in a lot of pain, like endometriosis, we are just labeled off as hysterical. There's a whole chapter about invisible conditions, these conditions that we can't see that are really about women. We really have to believe women to believe that they're suffering, and people just do not believe women.
Yeah. And although, big part of my work as a somatic and body-centered psychologist is that I do think that day-to-day life, the different ways in which we absorb dis-ease can turn into disease, including dealing with racism and sexism. I mean, that is felt in the body as well. Because I remember reading how you said that a lot of times, women with chronic pain, they're sent away from the doctor and just told to go to their therapist. And so as a psychologist, yes, I believe that there can be a lot of emotional issues that are connected to it, but that doesn't mean that then they should also not be treated in the medical community as well. And both places, I think, is where we need to recognize.
And when you think about how long it takes women to get a diagnosis, I mean, so many of almost all the women that I interviewed were told that they were being hysterical and imagining a problem, or it was all in their head. And almost none of those women were imagining it. It almost always ended up being, cancer, endometriosis, rheumatoid arthritis. So really serious issues. And the reason I focus on childbirth is because, and maternal mortality so much, not only because of my own experience of almost dying in childbirth in America, not only because of my childhood growing up in Bangladesh, which used to have, one of the highest maternal mortality rates in the world, which America was instrumental in reducing. The reason I focus on it is because maternal mortality numbers don't just tell us how many women are dying in childbirth in a country. They tell us how well our healthcare is functioning, how well our systems are functioning, and what the overall status is of women in society. So I'm constantly going back to these numbers because America's maternal health numbers, maternal mortality statistics, are the highest in the developing world. They're increasing. It's more dangerous for women to give birth in America now than it was for our mothers. And it's not because we don't have the resources or the skills or the knowledge or the expertise. And if the pandemic has shown us anything, is that we are expected to just carry it all, okay? All, and shut up about it. I mean, people really, that's why I'm like, we have to reclaim this. Not, women are so scared of being labeled, rightfully so, hysterical, that they actually don't speak up. They actually don't even share their stories. I mean, I'm sure you've seen this in your experience. How many times have you heard women talking like, I don't know if I'm crazy, but I don't know if I experienced, but I don't know if I'm imagining this. And it's like, no, you're not.
Right. Well, yeah, I think
that
we've been taught to not trust our own inner instinct and intuition. I mean, I think in the ways that we've been taught to not listen to our bodies. I mean, you know, generally males are raised and socialized to not listen to their emotions. Women are raised and socialized to not listen to their bodies. And so then we don't have boundaries with our body, or we don't know when to listen to its messages or to speak up. And, but I really think, yeah, the other issue is that's so sad with healthcare and the lack of health equity is that here we think, okay, America, rich country, but capitalism actually, when it treats healthcare as all about dollar signs.
Oh, it's all about dollar signs.
Then it's not about whole person health.
It really isn't. Mm-hmm. And you know, it's so many things that we know that now we're saying out loud. Like, you know, they don't want you to be in labor for 20, 30 hours. You know, you're taking up a room and, you know, you do a boom, boom C-section, you know, each C-section allegedly costs, hospitals make about roughly $50,000 off of versus a natural birth, you know? So it makes sense. And it is about hospitals are businesses. They are businesses. And they need to look at their bottom line, and they need to protect themselves against legal liability. I mean, that is their biggest thing. I mean, there's a few doctors that I spoke with, and, you know, this book is not anti-doctor or anti the medical system or anything like that at all. But there were a couple of doctors who were just like, well, you know, her baby died and it could have been preventable, but, you know, she has a great case for legal action. It's like, I think she wants her baby back.
You know, it just immediately goes litigious. Yeah. Well,
and you know, nobody cares, and they really don't want to hear it from women of color. They really don't.
Yeah, I'm noticing here, Minnehaha Mama is writing that she works, I know, in like public health, and we hear, quote, I just among women, or I'm sorry, but when seeking health support, like her issues, her health is an inconvenience, or it's something that she should just deal with it. I mean, how sad that that's the message that's been given. Maybe also because women are socialized to be told that they are supposed to be nurturers of others. So, to want to take care of oneself, their own health needs, they should feel guilty.
Also, Rachel, it's so crazy how we internalize this stuff. I mean, look at me. I'm like raised by a feminist. I'm such a big feminist. You know, I was working in this field. You know, this was my world. It wasn't like I didn't know what women's health was. Like, this was what I was doing. And I had no idea in the early 2000s, in mid 2000s even, that America had a maternal health crisis. Like, when I was being ignored and almost dying in childbirth in this country, I kept telling myself that it wasn't going to happen. You know, I didn't think that it was possible to die in childbirth in America. I kept telling myself, I'm in America, I'm in Washington, you know, I'm going to be fine. But the other thing I think about every day, I still think about this doctor. How did I not turn around and tell this MFer, you know, who didn't believe me after 30 hours of being in pain? You know, I was shaking and my epidural had come out. I'm in labor. You know, I've been pushing for 3 hours, and he wanted me to get up from the hospital bed myself to move on to the operating table. You know, I couldn't move. But anyway, I think that's why I never raised my voice. I was so polite, you know, to everybody, even though I was in excruciating pain. So it's interesting that you just, I mean, I still analyze this. I'm like, I think I was trying to be the perfect patient.
Well, and I think about it also in terms as a trauma body psychologist, where what happens when we're in trauma, our body, there's fight, flight, freeze. It's similar to how women maybe that are survivors of rape will feel really guilty that they didn't fight more, that they let it happen. And this feeling of shame and guilt, when really one of our trauma responses our body does is sort of that freeze. In fear, and because there's a body that's bigger than you, you know, weighing you down, that has force. So to freeze mode, or to do what's being told, on some level in the body and the nervous system says that's survival. Yeah, you know, you needed to survive.
Yeah. And the thing is like what's infuriating to me as well is that all of women's stories are like the statistics back us, you know, and we saw everything play out in real time during last year during COVID, but you know, it's still ongoing. We're just not, it's not only that we are dismissed and not listened to, we're not researched on. There's very little that is known about women's health, the statistics. I mean, the NIH weren't even required, it wasn't even legally required for them to make sure that they were testing on male and female mice.
Right, right.
The whole thing of where are all the female mice, because even now we are still doing this. And you know, we saw it during the COVID vaccine, the most anticipated vaccine of our lifetimes, completely excluded pregnant women. You know,
Well,
pregnant women were more at risk, they would get sicker, more women died last year from maternal health complications. I mean, it is infuriating, but it's also unacceptable.
well, and I see this also with regard as a sex therapist with things like Viagra or other medications that are really, that actually women, they don't do research on how it can impact women, when really something like Viagra actually can be really beneficial to women, but it's never been marketed that way because we wouldn't want that secret of a woman's sexual agency. It can come in that be helped by a pill to be out.
Can you imagine ad campaign for that be? I mean, I think the conservatives would just freak out. I mean, we're still fighting over basic birth control and family planning in this country, which if you go to look at Europe, it's not an issue. It is given out, you know. And now we're seeing with what's happening in Texas. I saw a really funny meme yesterday, even though the situation isn't funny. If men could get pregnant, it's from the comedy show Veep. You could get abortions at ATMs.
Oh,
and it's
seriously,
so
yeah.
true.
It's like my body, your choice, or my body, your control. White men.
It's infuriating. And you know, I was back home in Bangladesh last year. No, earlier this year. Gosh, the pandemic years are just
we're all in a time warp.
Yeah. It was in March of 2021, and I had to make a quick trip because, you know, I had family that wasn't well and whatnot. But I got to meet some women out in my father's constituency in the rural areas, and they were like, you know, really happy and excited that I had this book coming out in the States. But one of them said to me, you know, this is great about your book, but how does that impact, you know, women in Bangladesh if you're writing about women's health in America? And it kind of, you know, made me really step back. And then I thought, if American women, if women in the richest, most powerful country in the world don't get it right, the rest of us are so screwed. The rest of us are screwed.
Can I quote you to that end here along those lines? You said, sisterhood is truly global. And if there has ever been a time for women to tap into our collective power, it is now, because the need to revolutionize women's healthcare is urgent. I love that. I feel inspired.
Thank you. But you know what? It's really true. Like, that's another thing that's important about this book. It's not doom and gloom. I mean, I know I'm talking about like domestic violence, the pandemic, you know, endometriosis, you have it, but it's not a doom and gloom book. Everything is really solvable. The revolutionary thing, solvable. We have the tools, we have the knowledge. The revolutionary thing I'm actually asking for is believe us. Believe women of color.
Right. And I think too, women, let's believe ourselves. Like, really listen to what do you notice? What do you hear? Be your own best advocate. Because don't discount how you feel. Don't second guess, even if other people push back, because there will be pushback. I mean, there will be backlash, but that doesn't mean that your own inner knowing isn't true, even if it's inconvenient or they want to ignore it.
Also, yes, so right. Believe, like, we need to give ourselves, women are so amazing. We are so amazing. We really are. And our bodies are so amazing. I mean, they literally, our organs like rearrange themselves when we are getting ready to have a baby or when we're growing a baby. So women are so incredible. We're so resilient. We literally carried this pandemic on our backs last year. The moms, not only in America, around the world. Okay. I mean, I know I personally became a tech support for my 9-year-old, you know, while being the nanny and the house cleaner and trying to, you know, maintain my career and, you know, write this book proposal. And I just see women do it every day, all the time, in their own ways and in their own lives, you know, from really rich women to really poor women. And I just feel like when women get together and organize and mobilize, we can really take on anything. And I think that is what the patriarchy is really scared of.
Yes. Yeah. And I think for just our own resilience, I want to encourage women to also just enjoy the pleasures of rest, of whether it be a nap or saying, no, I can't help you today, maybe tomorrow, but to really that idea of self-nurturance, given how we're obviously badasses at nurturing and tending to others, but I see a lot of guilt that women, that, yeah.
I'm trying not to have it, me too. And even just, giving yourself pleasure, like what your book is about. I mean, that is, it's so funny in a way. Our books really do complement each other, because it's like they want to keep us in pain and away from the pleasure, because that keeps us down. I can't even imagine what would happen if women collectively reclaimed our sexual power and rights, and oh my God, our right to pleasure the way men do. I mean, can you imagine? Yeah, Viagra for women. It would be so scandalous.
All right. So yeah, all of life's pleasures, right? And the life force energy that it brings us. Yeah. I want to be cognizant of time, because I know you have to run. There's one question here, maybe if there is time to just answer. So Minnehaha Mama asks, do you think the disparities in health outcomes for women of color are more about access or advocacy once they have access to care?
That is really interesting. I think it's both. I think really important. And you look at the numbers. I mean, Black women in America, I always say when things are bad for white women, they're worse for brown women, and they're the worst for Black women. I mean, Black women are 243% more likely than their white counterparts to die in childbirth. And for a really long time, it was race, right? Like, our welfare queens, and they live, they're not as educated. But now we're actually seeing that the more educated a Black woman is, the more degrees you have, you're actually 5 times more likely to get into medical settings. So the angry Black woman trope, a lot of things play into it. But I think the most important thing is it's really important to have an advocate, Black, white, or and that's actually one of the things I say in my book that was recommended by experts. Take somebody with you into your doctor's appointment as well. And like I was saying, this isn't, an anti-doctor or anti-medical establishment book. I mean, I think the really interesting thing is women don't know that they have choices. I didn't know that I had. If you don't feel safe with your doctor, you can always leave and get.
And to your point, I can only imagine what the situation is like for transgender women. But yeah, I think that I as we wrap up here, definitely that this message of you have a right to speak up, that you're not bad or wrong or an inconvenience, that there is that you need to just try to really reclaim your power, your voice, and listen to your body.
One of the most important things is I think that we've been taught to look at the doctor as the most important person in our healthcare. But I was, in the book, I say, your healthcare, you should approach it like a team. And the most important member of that team is actually you.